Today, I am going to be answering the question, are my downloads decreasing because of iOS 17 and the changes that Apple has made? Well, friend, the answer is probably yes. Yup, because my downloads are down a lot. And I'm going to share with you why that is actually nothing to worry about, and how we can utilize this to our benefit as podcasters. And also, P.S., I think you need to know this so that you just don't freak out and give in the towel. Throw in the towel. Ski! Are you ready to grow your online business, make consistent income, start a successful podcast? Welcome to Online Business for Christian Women with Stephanie Gass. It's time to grow, girl. On September 18th of 2023, Apple released iOS 17. Apple also made some other changes to Apple Podcasts as well, right along that same time frame. Now, as I continued to podcast and come December, completely revitalized my show and we gave it a facelift and continued to note that my downloads just continued to decline, I started to get worried. A couple months ago, I became aware of iOS 17 affecting podcast downloads. And the reason for this is because Apple basically made a shift. When somebody is subscribed to a podcast, in the past, every single episode would download and it would count as a download number inside of that podcaster's metrics. Okay, this is prior September of 2023. Now it quit auto downloading in essence. Okay. So basically fewer automatic downloads mean fewer downloads sitting unplayed on people's phones. That's what Apple wanted to do. So while this is really great for people who pay for advertising spots on podcasts and things like that, it stinks for podcasters because so many of us, myself and a lot of my students included, we used the download number as a metric to gauge if our podcast was actually growing and getting listened to. That inevitably made me completely freak out and think that my life was over and that I was going to have to retire as a podcast coach, that everything was awful and wrong in the world, and I completely spiraled. Now, God is so good. And as I turned this whole thing over to him in this moment of surrender, he so lovingly reminded me a couple of days ago that I had glanced over something to do with this iOS 17 update. And I read it again and realized oh my gosh, this is not me. This is not because my podcast is not doing great. This is truly because of the iOS 17 shift. 80% of my listens as a podcaster come from Apple. If you've been podcasting for a while and your episode number is growing steadily, I'm talking you're over 25,000, 50,000, 100,000 downloads, this is going to affect you. My newbie podcasters or my new students, you're not really going to be affected by this because as you get your podcast going, you're listened to across a wide variety of platforms. So you're typically in the clear. But any large podcaster with a bunch of reach at this point, this is going to dramatically impact your download number. And you are already really in probably 3 to 6 months of a potential decline, if not a holding pattern. Oh no, what should we do, Steph? Do we quit podcasting? Is everything just going to go up in flames? No. Take a deep breath. I've taken a deep breath. Praise God. He's given me peace because that is how good he is. There is absolutely nothing to worry about. This is actually really a great thing for our industry. Downloads were never a great metric in the first place. Somebody came and subscribed to my podcast and then my episodes would auto download on their phone. It was never a true depiction of who's actively and actually listening to the podcast. And so it kind of gave this inflated number and not a true number based on what is our audience size and how many people are engaging and listening to the show. So it really wasn't ever great. And I want metrics that show me real data so that I can use that data to continue to grow my podcast. That is one thing that I really want you guys to consider, is that this is actually a good thing for the industry. They're going to have to cheer this up. And this is putting a lot of pressure on all the major podcast hosts, Apple, Spotify, all of them, to really come up with a universal solution for this. I want you guys to realize we good. Hang tight. What we have to do though is we have to completely eliminate the vanity metric of depending on downloads. And that's really weird because for 5.5 years as a podcaster and as a podcast coach, I have taught people to utilize downloads as the metric. And until September of 2023, that was good sound advice. However, here we are. And I think as business owners and entrepreneurs in today's day and age, we have to consistently be willing to adapt, to find what's working and refine, and to figure out what's not working and throw it out. And here we sit. So here's what I want you guys to take a look at. Question number 1 is, are my downloads actually declining? That is the first piece of information that we need to seek, because I know for me, I was panicking until I answered this question and I kind of pinpoint the moment in which those downloads started to happen. So if you log into your podcasting host, me and my students use Podbean, but whichever one you use, and you click on analytics and maybe take a look at the past 6 months, the past 12 months, and try to pinpoint when the download number started to either stay stagnant or decline. Most of you are going to see that it was around between September and December of 2023, maybe January. But for most of us, it was back at the end of last year. Well, friend, iOS 17 was literally released at the end of September of last year. So if you see that, people started adapting to the new software and downloading it on their phone pretty quickly. I know I did. And then the majority of users were to follow in the next 90 days. So by January of 2024, a lot of people had already shifted over to iOS 17, causing those auto downloads to stop. Okay. So if you can pinpoint that in your metric map, you know that this is what you're facing, and you can kind of alleviate all that fear and concern around you just stinking as a podcaster. It's not you, it's them. You know what I mean? It's not me, it's you. Like, sorry. Anyways. Okay. So question number 2 is the size of my Apple podcast audience declining? Here's where this gets really juicy. You can actually log in to Apple Podcast Connects and navigate to analytics. So you go into Apple Podcasts Connect, and that link is podcasters.apple.com. And all of you probably already have an account. You're just going to sign into this account. You're actually going to sign in to podcasters.apple.com, and you're going to find your show, and you're going to click on your podcast. And when you get in here, you're going to go to analytics. And of course, they make this like really difficult to figure out, but you go to analytics and then you're going to go to your podcast. And this got so confusing for me at first. So you actually I had to scroll all the way to the right and click on trends. And then I had to click under the purple button that says all time and change it to be all time, so that like it would actually grab my total analytics. And then you're going to change the drop down on the left, go under listeners, and then by engagement. And this is going to show you your engaged listener number. If you guys take a look at my chart, it's completely up and to the right. Like, sure, I see a little bit of a stagnation like August, September, October, November, December, January, but like actually it's pretty stable. I'm not concerned. You can also look inside of here at like plays. You can click the plays button to take a look. You can click the followers button. And I mean, look at the followers here. It's like completely up and to the right, completely up and to the right. And so this is going to give you a lot of peace knowing, wow, my download number is down. My followers, my listeners, my plays is either stable or up. That just gave me a lot of peace. So those of you who are tracking metrics, I might consider shifting to tracking your follower number directly from inside of Apple Podcast Connect dashboard. Or you can also track your listeners or your plays in here for the Apple related metrics. Now, please note, those of you that are newer in podcasting, and maybe even as this landscape shifts and transitions, you know, Spotify may very well become one of the larger players here in this podcasting space. We're just going to have to hang tight and see how it all shakes out. Okay, now the third and final question that we need to ask ourselves as podcasters is, how does this benefit me? How can I learn to grow through this, to adapt, and to get better because of it. I see a few really awesome opportunities. The first is that I think people are going to give up. Not to say I'm excited that people are going to give up, but like if someone is very unaware of what's going on and they're not part of a podcasting community like ours, and that was me, like I didn't even know this was happening to me, okay? Like I was just panicking, but people might think, oh man, my podcast is just free falling. I'm just going to throw in the towel, like this isn't working. And I think that is the critical importance of staying true to the thing that you decided you were going to stay true to until, I have never felt more clear that I'm supposed to be podcasting, that it is the way that I am in the world to connect with all of you, the way that God has asked me to share my giftings, the way that I can best communicate the things that I have walked through as an online business owner and as a person who feels so convicted about creating a business that is glorifying, that is peaceful, that allows me to be present. And it's podcasting. And I never felt that shift in my heart happen where it's like, oh, I should give up. My downloads are going down. But so many people are so emotionally driven. Don't be that person. Allow yourself to feel something and then look at the data, dig in a little bit and get resilient. The podcasters who stayed in the game and didn't freak out and are still standing are going to be rising to the top. I'm also here to share with you that those of us who are hanging on and digging in and continuously giving our giftings and opening our mouths and teaching and guiding and mentoring through the content that we share, we are being blessed by it because each of these podcast platforms are coming up with more and more amazing ways for us to be seen and found. Some of the fun Apple Podcast changes are they're allowing different podcast art per episode. They have some really cool filter and search features that they have just recently added that allow people to search for certain things and find our shows even more easier. This game, it's not going away. Like we are players in an incredible game right now. Content creation is just growing and exploding. And if we don't have our foot in the door, which we do, thankfully, we're losing. If you want to be an online business owner that makes money in the next 12 to 24 months, you've got to be in the game and you've got to learn and adapt and stay true and continuously show up and continuously rise to the occasion. And the occasion that we are being asked to rise to as God-led podcasters today is not to give up because one of our metrics changed. That is the least of our worries. Our number one responsibility is to continue to shine and show up in our giftings and in our niche for the glory of God. So you keep doing you keep digging in. And until next time, friend, you'll know exactly where to find me right here on this podcast because I am not going anywhere. I am here to show up for you every single week. And I pray that you have that type of tenacity for the people that you're called to help too. Love you. Big hugs. We're in this together. Let's keep going.